me, Wakanda, Black Panther, Wakanda forever. Explains. Let me explain.
In 2015, Saudi Arabia's ultra-conservative leadership changed hands, and in the past year, the government has relaxed a lot of its formerly restrictive policies. Women are allowed to drive, women can now have access to government services without needing the permission of a male guardian. Saudi Arabia is also allowing movie theaters to open for the first time since the 1980s, finally breaking the 35-year ban with the showing of the Emoji Movie.
Huh?
On second thought here, guys, maybe overturning that movie ban wasn't such a good idea.
Okay. Okay.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory. Hi. Alright, let's learn about some economics together.
The show that takes utopian fictional societies and pits them against the cold, harsh reality of the real world. And that's why I'm excited today to talk about Marvel's Black Panther. As a character, you have to acknowledge how completely awesome this guy is. So awesome, in fact, that it's gonna totally make up for the fact that Killmonger is the worst supervillain name, like, ever. At the very least, that we've ever seen in a Marvel film. But today's theory isn't about Black Panther himself, it's actually about the country that he rules over, the mysterious Wakanda.
The mysterious Wakanda.
Now, Wakanda is an isolationist African country. Its geography has kept it off limits to most of the world, and despite being chronically bad at sharing, we're gonna get to that, it's one of the most technologically advanced countries on Earth in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I'm here today to tell you that it's not the vibranium that exists within its borders or
Wait, what? You're not talking about vibranium?
Black Panther's superpowers that's the most fictional part of this story. Oh no! I'm about to show you how the economy of Wakanda is completely unsustainable. And if you happen to be living there right now, well then, whoo boy, you're gonna wanna get out of Dodge before the walls come tumbling around you. And I'm not even talking about Thanos yet. So you ready for me
Oh, okay. What did I
to
miss?
ruin this one? Strap in, ladies and gentlemen, because we're taking a delightful tour through Marvel's world of macroeconomics. Now, in Black Panther, Wakanda's success is credited to the country having a monopoly on vibranium, a super strong metal that's the strongest on Earth.
Okay, so we're talking about macroeconomics and vibranium.
Mostly because it's not even from Earth. It's actually from a meteorite that crashed into the nation's borders. And we've seen plenty of evidence of vibranium's strength in the movies already, from Ultron's body, to Vision's body, to Captain America's shield. And given the fact that Cap's shield holds up to Thor's hammer, you know you got yourself a metal as tough as the Miracle Blade Pro. So okay, if you're the average Marvel moviegoer, you're probably like, okay, yeah, this country has this really valuable resource, so that totally explains why it's rich. Movie logic is logical, except it's not.
Movie logic is logical,
Really.
right?
In fact, there's a real-world theory that addresses why this isn't logical at all, and it's called the paradox of plenty. The paradox of plenty tries to explain why countries that sit on massive and super rare natural resources also happen to be the same ones that top the lists of, hey, our economies are in the pooper most of the time. Take countries like Saudi Arabia, for instance, which is the world's largest exporter of oil, yet millions of Saudis live in poverty, earning less than $530 a month. And Saudi Arabia's unemployment is 12.7%, which is huge. The paradox of plenty says that even though one area of the economy is booming because of a natural resources, other areas lag behind because there's a disproportionate amount of resources going to that one booming industry. Ultimately, this leads to prices of some goods and services in the country being way out of whack compared to other areas.
Okay, so something that we can maybe keep in mind about something called the paradox of plenty. The more you know.
Theory has some holes, for sure, and if we're talking about the movie, this doesn't really seem to play out for Wakanda, where everyone is happy and educated and definitely isn't skipping leg day. But real countries who use this system don't usually end up with great technology and awesome Afro-modern style inspiration.
Have you thought about the leadership involved? Like maybe they have skilled professionals, competent, responsible leaders involved that know how to manage a country, govern a country properly. Because if you have bad leaders, if your leaders are bad, it will trickle down. 上梁不正，下梁歪，都是要靠领导的。Alright，我们来上梁不正，下梁歪。
So what's going on here? Well, in the real world, there's another part of this paradox of plenty that makes the situation more complicated. Part of the paradox is that countries with a single massive resource also tend to be countries with the least democracy. Again, Saudi Arabia is a big check mark there, but so are places like Russia and Venezuela, both of which are huge on natural resource and teeny on the democratic freedoms. Come to think of it, Wakanda is actually a lot like that too. It's not like they elected their rulers. T'Chaka just passed down the crown to his son T'Challa, and not in that cutesy meaningless way like the Brits do. No, T'Challa is actually the head of state. So what's going on there? Why is Wakanda so different? If these countries all have similar structures, then why does Wakanda's system work, and what are all the other countries doing wrong? Well, that democracy thing is a big factor here. You see, in Black Panther, T'Chaka and T'Challa only care about the well-being of their people, and so any money earned from the sale of government-controlled vibranium gets invested back into things like education or new businesses for the citizens of Wakanda. But in the real world, government officials aren't quite so altruistic. You remember reading Machiavelli in 10th grade and learning the whole phrase that absolute power corrupts absolutely? I had to hear it
Absolute power corrupts absolute.
over and over again anytime I read Animal Farm. I mean, don't get me wrong, I rolled my eyes during that too, but the principle is true in almost every dictatorship in history.
In almost, unless the rarity of it being someone that have morals, have good, strong foundational morals, under circumstances, environments that enables them to fully enact responsible decisions.
From Stalin to Mao to Mugabe. Turns out when you give someone too much power in government, or sometimes like any power in government, they end up using it to
Printing and copying manager.
take as much control as possible. And taking control happens to be a heck of a lot easier in countries where there's only one big natural resource. I mean, think about it. In the US, there are a ton of different industries. Everything from corn to coal mining to computers. Everything that makes the country money. But what if we only produced one thing? Well, taking control of that one industry would basically mean controlling the entire country. And wouldn't you know it, but in countries with only one super valuable resource, that's usually what happens. Look again towards Saudi Arabia. All oil fields that are owned by the government and the ruling classes, who are all fantastically wealthy, and everyone else just isn't. For another historic example, try the Soviet Union, where during the Cold War, the country sold off some of its huge natural gas reserve. But did they use the profits to help their people out? Not exactly. It was more like this. The Soviet people were like, "Oh, wise government, we need potatoes and also pants. And we're also Italian for some reason." The Soviet leaders were like, no, we're going to use this money for weapons research. We're pretty sure you actually want nuclear warheads." Soviet people respond with no, thank you very much, but we actually just really need the pants. It's like minus 40 degrees here in Siberia. No, trust us, you're going to love these atomic bombs. They're very warm. I have no clue how many accents I butchered during that little scenelet there. Anyway, that's basically the problem. The leaders of the country control all the money because they control the only big industry. When this happens, it's what's known as a command and control economy.
Command and control economy.
Sounds a bit Darth Vader-y, right? Well, it kinda is. It's basically the leadership of your country telling everybody that it knows better than anyone else what the country really wants, or...
Stop! If that's the case, why not have a third party, fourth party, fifth party to check? Right? Who check on power? There must be check and balances involved, right? And then there must be consequence in the check and balances.
Really needs. This happens a lot in some of the saddest cases of human rights violations in the world. In a pretty recent example, Venezuela's command and control economy under President Maduro became super reliant on oil in 2012. Almost 90% of the economy revolved around government-owned oil, their one major natural resource. This wasn't much of a problem until the price of oil fell, when there was competition from other countries, and now all of a sudden the government had no money to buy anything. Up until that point, the government had been providing almost everything the people had through subsidies, but when the oil money ran dry, there were just major shortages of pretty much everything.
Diversify. Don't forget that do not put all your eggs into one basket. Diversification is important, right?
The result was what citizens called the Maduro Diet, named after the president who was supposed to provide for them, but instead couldn't afford to stock food on grocery store shelves, leaving Venezuelans to literally eat garbage to survive. And this wasn't our grandparents' problem we're talking about. This wasn't the Cold War 50 years ago. This was literally last year, when 90% of the population of Venezuela reported that they couldn't afford enough to eat. And that is the problem in situations like this. No government, no matter how good and altruistic they may intend to be, can predict what people are gonna want or need the most. Not to mention stuff that hasn't even been invented yet. It is simply impossible. And so time and time again, command and control economies fail from being A, corrupt, B, trying to provide people with the wrong things, or just fail outright because of C. All of the above. So, overall, Wakanda, which is a command and control economy run by a wealthy ruling class, isn't looking all that likely here. But for the sake of this theory, let's say it does work. That it's a system that isn't corrupt and that King T'Challa magically knows what all of his citizens want and need.
What if they have a system? What if they have a system in which everybody is properly educated on what to do, on the roles and responsibilities that they have in society? Will they help? Will that significantly help the situation? I want to know that.
Again, in history, this doesn't actually tend to work out, but hey, I want to believe in the power of Marvel movies, so for the moment, let's just let that part slide. Great. Even letting that big issue go, that's still not gonna stop this whole economic situation from biting Black Panther and his heavily reinforced vibranium behind. His country may be beautiful now and his fashion sense may all be on fleek, but give it a couple years and the tables will undoubtedly start to turn. First, let's talk about what really happens when you make it illegal to buy or sell something, which is basically what Wakanda is doing when they're restricting the sale of vibranium.
Black market.
Remember, Wakanda's rulers
Underground.
own the whole supply, and they don't allow anyone else to sell it outside the country. This makes it massively expensive. How expensive? Well, the vibranium used to construct Vision's body cost Ultron several $1 billion on the black market. That's right, I said billion with a B.
Multi-billions.
Notice that I also said black market, also with a B, and also an M. You see, that's what actually happens when you make it illegal to buy or trade something. You get a booming black market for whatever that thing is. For a bizarre example, did you know that there's a black market for Botox? Botox cures everything from wrinkles to migraines, but the pharmaceutical company who owns it has a patent on it that lasts for decades. And patents work a lot like enforced monopolies, so only that one company controls that one resource. Sound familiar? And in this case, just like in Wakanda, motivated people don't wait for the official company to produce Botox. They buy black market Botox in Russia or other countries in Eastern Europe for a fraction of the price. Even from evidence in the movies, we can see that people, and especially supervillains, are buying vibranium under the table and using it to develop weapons.
Have you been juicing? A little vibranium cocktail?
And why the heck shouldn't they? The smugglers who are selling it stand to make a huge profit, and motivated people aren't just gonna sit around and wait for the next time Wakanda wants to sell a dime bag of vibranium legally. So, heck, going out on the street corner, slip me a $5. Slip me a $5, like a $5 bill? Clearly you can tell I am not proficient in the lingo of buying and selling goods on the black market.
Buying or selling vibranium? No, it's a fictional material. You do know that, right? It's a fictional material.
This means, like, give me a $5 bill, right? It's not an actual drug unit? I don't know. But you know what? We're not done yet, because we have not even addressed the biggest issue that Wakanda isn't even thinking about here. When the world has something that's scarce, what usually happens? Do we usually just use it all up and say, well, that was fun while it lasted? That oil phase, that was a really cool phase, wasn't it? Not really. When there's a scarcity of a resource, prices go up. That's called supply and demand. If the price gets too high, people are like, I'm gonna use less of this to save money. Or maybe I'll stop using it altogether. together and figure out something to replace this thing. It's especially that last part that Wakanda has to worry about here. Just look at history to tell you why. Back in the 1800s, everyone used to use whale oil in their lamps. Besides being really tragic and sad, it also started to get really expensive when whales, you know, started to go extinct. Like I said, this whole thing is really sad, but go figure, it gets better. Whale oil became so rare that people couldn't afford it anymore, so they started finding alternatives, specifically switching to kerosene. At the time, crude oil was just this sludge that farmers kept getting annoyed by in Texas, but people realized it would burn better than whale oil, and go figure, it was a heck of a lot cheaper. So they switched. When the oil tycoons came along, oil got even cheaper, and then all of a sudden people could heat their houses, run cars, and finally leave the whales alone. Not because they were super nice or because whales are majestic, but because they found a better, cheaper alternative. TLDR, John D. Rockefeller saved the whales. No joke. For a more close-to-home example for all us on the internet though, you ever wonder where fiber optic cable came from? As early as the 1980s, copper became scarce, but the demand for copper wiring for phones and electricity was huge. So instead of paying super high copper prices, people started to look for cheaper, more effective ways to deliver cable. And
in a different material.
Discovered fiber optics. Fiber optic cables are literally made of sand, which there's no shortage of. Actually delivers better signals than copper ever did and happens to be dirt cheap, literally.
Literally dirt cheap.
The point of these examples is that when resources are too expensive, people don't just sit around and wait for the next time some greedy country wants to sell some off. No, sir. Instead, they leave the country in the dust by developing an alternative. Saudi Arabia makes oil more expensive, Tesla develops a lower-cost electric car. Sugarcane gets too expensive in the US. Well, the US switches to corn syrup. Wakanda keeps the price of vibranium in the billions? We can literally see Tony Stark already studying the stuff in his lab so he can replicate it himself or discover something better. Think he won't? The real world begs to differ. And when that happens, I wouldn't want to be Black Panther ruling over Wakanda. Remember what I said about that one resource dictating the entire economy? Well, unfortunately for Wakanda, when the rest of the world isn't relying on vibranium anymore, they have no backup plan. All of a sudden, the rulers of Wakanda have to compete on an international level with other substances that might just be as good, if not better, than their vibranium.
Why not use other resources, like for example, human resource? Use collective, like what does your country have to offer? Maybe your country have to offer a lot of sugar canes. Your country maybe a lot of oil, a lot of gas. Or maybe your country have a lot of talented individuals. Maybe your country have a lot of educated professionals. That can be a resource that can help benefit your country, right? Can help benefit your country, or can benefit your region, can benefit your continent, can benefit the entire world. Yeah.
Their monopoly gets busted. On top of that, remember that command and control economy they're working with? Well, it means that up to this point, the Wakanda rulers have been responsible for providing everything for their citizens, from education to jobs to money. But when vibranium isn't worth as much, the whole system falls apart. An entire population that's been totally isolated now has to fend for itself when the country can't support them anymore. And even some basic high school economics and history says that it's only a matter of time before that happens. So what does King T'Challa really need to do in this situation? First of all, maybe play a little nicer with those trade partners you're gonna need later on. And for goodness sake, don't wait for someone to develop that vibranium alternative. You need to get rid of that stuff before it's just another heap of useless scrap metal, my friend. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And postscript. Yeah, I'm back because this episode was written before I actually saw the movie, and now that it's out in theaters and I have finally seen it, I gotta say, everything in this episode ended up coming to fruition, didn't it? First, a big spoiler alert from here on out, so if you were like me and were barely able to get into a showing this opening weekend, well, might want to come back to this episode a bit after you've seen the film.
Alright, so there is the postscript and also spoilers. Sorry.
Everyone out who wants to get out? Good. Okay, so 3 quick things I wanted to mention here. First, how about that whole Killmonger situation, right? When he seizes control of the country, 100% legitimately, I might add, he's the one man in charge of the country's primary resource, vibranium. And even though people might be really upset about him choosing to send it off to his war dogs around the world, that's entirely his right as the sole decision maker of the country. It's a perfect demonstration of the challenges of a command and control economy that we talked about in this episode.
Unless they change the law, unless they change the regulations, unless they change the rules, 国有国法，家有家规. But you must understand that 国法家规 sometimes are wrong. Change it when it's inappropriate, right?
One, or a small handful of people, can choose to do whatever they want with the sole resource everything in the economy depends on. And as we see in the movie, it prompts a literal civil war amongst the people as they fight over what to do with the vibranium supply. Then, did y'all notice T'Challa's line about the world catching up and how that makes it more critical that Wakanda open its borders in terms of knowledge and technology? It's exactly what we just said about vibranium making itself obsolete if the country isn't nicer to its potential trade partners. Which leads us to the conclusion of the entire film. Wakanda shows itself to be open to helping the rest of the world, which is exactly the recommendation we made for it in the first place. The Wakandan economy has moved past how it was run by its ancestors, and it's evolved, and now the country will be able to remain viable for years to come. So hey, it actually turned out to not really be a theory. It turned out to be a film fact, which honestly is pretty darn cool.
I agree with you. If you keep yourself close and do not try to spread to everyone else, and while everyone else is trying to catch up with you, 1 decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, 4 decades, 1 generation, 2 generations, 3 generations, and people start to wonder, why does my grandfather generation is better than mine? Why not my generation is better than my grandfather's generation? This kind of question will start to occur.
Not only did Black Panther end up being a great movie, it was also great on the macroeconomic issues underlying everything that you saw happen on screen. And for that, Black Panther gets the theorist seal of approval. But seriously guys, you gotta find a better way to choose your heads of state. I mean, a waterfall fist fight is in no way ensuring that you're getting the best leaders in that position. And now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go and watch the sunset. Please subscribe in the meantime. And cut.
Subscribe! Yep, thank you so much. Do remember to subscribe to my channel and subscribe to the Film Series channel. Thank you all so much for watching this video together with me. I hope that you find this video very educational and very wise. If you do like this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Comment down below if you have any about. Don't forget to follow my channel. I still appreciate all the support and encouragement for my work. Really grateful and thankful for all your positivity and wholesomeness and uplifting, motivating words. Thank you all so much, and hope to see you all in my next video. But hey, that's just a theory, a film theory, and cut. And I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you so much, sincerely appreciative for all of you. Touch my heart, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Subscribe!